Hari Om. Parama Pujya Swamiji on the dais as well as off the dais. Sahasra Koti pranams to all of you. The one dignitary and fellow panelist on the dais, and ladies and gentlemen. To use golfing parlance, I'm on a handicap. I'm the last speaker. I'm reminded of a speech that Sri Rajnarayan had given in 1977. Those of you who are as old as I am will remember this was a speech in Ram Leela Maidan of Delhi. The Janta government had won the election, the Lok Sabha election. It was the first non-Congress election or non-Congress government that was being formed in the center. So start politicians right from Jaiprakash Narayan onwards, Morarji Desai, all of them, leaders. They all stood up and delivered their speeches. At the end, it was Rajnarayan ji's turn. He stood up and he said, "Kya bolu? Sab kuch bol ke chale gaye hain." That in a nutshell sums up the position that I am in as well. Several legal luminaries before me, the best, most erudite, most eloquent jurists, they've covered pretty much the entire gamut of whatever one could talk about when it comes to temple autonomy and role of government in Hindu religious institutions. Nevertheless, I'll talk about 5 key points. Enough speakers before me have spoken about secularism, non-secularism. I fail to understand how in any institution you can segregate a secular activity and a non-secular activity. Let me take the example of Infosys. Suppose, God forbid, Infosys were to be taken over because of mismanagement, gross mismanagement by government. Suppose it were to be taken over. Can you segregate the software development function from the non-software development function? In my humble, honest opinion, you can't. Everything that goes on in a temple, every activity is religious in nature. There is nothing that is secular about it, period. Number 2, secularism is something we all know about it. There are 2 instances in the Constitution. It's only twice that it appears in the Constitution. But then secularism drives our entire political discourse. I don't know how many of you, everybody knows what secularism means, but I'm not sure how many of you know the history behind secularism. I'm sure the legal luminaries would. Firstly, it's a European concept, and if I may be permitted to say so, it's a Christian concept. Why is it Christian? Because the fundamental doctrine of Christianity is that humans are born in sin, and Lord Jesus was born to save humanity. So, non-Christians, only baptized Christians will go to heaven. Non-baptized, non-Christians are bound to go to hell on Judgment Day. That's what their faith is all about. Effectively, if you were to think about it, Christianity believes in an afterlife. A life on this planet and an afterlife somewhere in heaven or hell. Essentially, there are 2 worlds in Christianity, physical and the spiritual. Whereas in Sanatana Dharma, we believe in rebirth. Fundamental difference between the 2 faiths. So the monarchs who believed in Europe that they had a divine right to rule people, they tried to rule church as well. Why? Churches were within their territory, within their jurisdiction. Now, this didn't go well with the popes, the papacy. The papacy believed that the pope, being the vicar, the agent of Jesus, the Lord, had a right to rule everyone in this world and beyond. So there was a clash between the pope and the rulers, the feudal lords. It reached a point wherein the rulers of Europe got together. They waged a battle, a war against the Vatican. Pope Boniface VIII, he was vanquished and imprisoned. The man committed suicide by banging his head against the wall. And finally, when they took the body for performing the last rites, they found he had chewed into his arm out of hunger. So much of violence, so much of bloodshed. Later on in the 16th century, that is how this whole doctrine of two-world theory was something that Martin Luther came up with, and it gained momentum. And the whole idea behind this two-kingdom theory was there is a kingdom here, the physical realm, and there is a kingdom up there, somewhere up there, in the spiritual realm. And that was how this whole concept of separation of state and religion took root. And then it gained momentum. John Locke, Voltaire, several thinkers endorsed. And finally, a gentleman called Holyoake coined the term secular. Essentially, all of secularism is about segregating state from religion, segregating government, separating government from religion. And what do we have out here? There is selective involvement of government in religion. It is contrary to the very foundational, the very fundamental principle of secularism. That's point number one. Point number two, out of curiosity, with my limited knowledge of Sanatana Dharma, I really wanted to understand what Hindu thought is all about, Sanatana Dharma is all about. Did my own little research. On one hand, I came up with this list of spiritual and philosophical ideologies. And on the other hand, I came up with these religious practices. I listed the first one, the former, is essentially darshanas, and the latter, in my own parlance, I call them sampradayas. I could list about 25 darshanas, Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa. There's several of those, starting from Nirishwaravada to Astika, Nastika. I put them on a big, huge chart. 25 darshanas, 25 to 30 darshanas. The sampradayas were in excess of 100. I shared them all with people who had studied a little more than, or rather a lot more than what I had on Sanatana Dharma. And they said, you've just scraped the surface. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And not only that, they said, if you really need to understand, you cannot put it in a chart, in a tree structure kind of a thing, because it's all networked. And that's when I felt, we just loosely use the term Hinduism, Hindu way of life, all that, which is very nice. Nothing against it. But then if at all we are considering coming up with a legislation, it is paramount that we really make sure that we define Sanatana Dharma comprehensively. Because tomorrow, if you were to say a Hindu is somebody who believes in the Veda, somebody may say, I don't believe in the Veda. And then would you call him a non-Hindu and then say he is another religion, a minority religion? So that is one of the challenges that we have, really making sure that whatever legislation here, obviously we are thinking of doing away with legislation, state as well as union center. But assuming there is one single legislation in the center, this is something that we need to really think about. The third point is this term denomination. Again, a Christian term. Interestingly, Apte's dictionary, Sanskrit to English dictionary of 1891, that was the first edition, does not talk about denomination being a connotation of sampradaya. This was introduced in a later dictionary by Mornier Williams in his Sanskrit to English dictionary. Now, the funny thing about this, if you look into it, is here is a dharmic, Sanatana dharmic concept. Now, some European came up with a term that he could think of, which was closest in his view to what sampradaya meant. And that became the gold standard. And that gold standard has been incorporated in the Constitution. So today it is like trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. We are force fitting denomination whenever we talk of Hindu rights. I think it is high time we do away with this term called denomination, or at least make an effort to define unambiguously what denomination means, specifically keeping Sanatana Dharma in mind. In fact, if you were to understand the real meaning of Sampradaya, at least in my opinion, and then compare it with denomination, the two are as different as chalk and cheese. There's no comparison, but still, this has been forced down our throats. Denomination means Sampradaya. The fourth point that I want to talk about is in Sanatana Dharma, in a temple, in a Devalaya, it's an Alaya, it's a palace where the deity has been consecrated. Now the deity, once Prana Pratishtapana has been done as per an Agama Shastra, the deity is alive, living. And that is the reason why devotees go there to do darshan. Within the Garbhagruha, deity rights are paramount. Why? Because the belief, the faith that I have is that it's a living, it's a palace. I am visiting my Lord in the temple. Interestingly, and the reason why this is so vital is because I know of a temple in Nepal, a Krishna temple, that has been consecrated using Shaktagama. You would generally assume, because it's a Krishna temple, you would assume it's some Vaishnava Agama. But no, that is the innate diversity that exists within Sanatana Dharma and Devalayas. So, if you were to look at Sampradayas and deity rights, there is a clear demarcation. Within the Garbhagruha, there is a Sampradayic right of the deity itself and the way the deity has been consecrated, the agamas that have been used, etc. And those rights necessarily need to be protected. Today, we all know that there are over 4 lakh temples. Some put it at 5, others have even put it at 8 lakh temples across the country that are being governed by the state. This is absolute nonsense. It should not happen. If you call yourself secular, and we are proud, if you were to look at the constitution, you would be proud, and a lot of people say, oh, we are a secular country. So the sooner government gets out of temples, the better off Dharma would be, in my opinion. And this relinquishment is very clear. Chidambaram judgment clearly states, if at all there is mismanagement, let government come in, rectify matters, and then get out of temples within a period of 2 years. Not only that, if they want to take over temples, they need to necessarily give the reason for why they want to take over a temple. And that's clearly not happening. So if, assuming there is going to be a central legislation, there are certain key elements that need to necessarily be in there. Now, a lot of people do talk about regulation being at the heart of it. To me, there needs to be a paradigm shift in our thinking. The paradigm today in whatever legislation we have is command and control. The state commands and it controls temples. This should shift to checks and balances, like it is done with, we are talking about 5 lakh temples. There are 10 lakh companies. There are 20 lakh societies, 40 lakh cooperative societies, in excess of 1 crore trusts, private, some private trusts, others public charitable trusts. Nobody, government, when Satyam happened, scam, government came and took over Satyam, got out of Satyam. Period. End of story. Here you have government ruling over, controlling temples ad infinitum, ad nauseum. And that has to stop. So the essence of any legislation, be it at the center or be it at the state, is akin, the regulation is akin to holding a beautiful parrot in your hand. You hold the parrot too tight, you're going to kill the parrot. You hold the parrot too loose, it's going to fly away. So that balance has to be struck, and that's essential insofar as any legislation for regulating temples are concerned. To me, from a management standpoint, as a student of management, I talk about 10 T's, that are related to temples: aesthetic beauty, architectural purity of the temple, structural integrity, the material quality that is used when you're maintaining it, spiritual sanctity of the temple, ritualistic propriety. Whatever rituals are being carried out in the temple, it has to be as per agamas, as per sampradayas. Administrative probity, socio-cultural activity, and religious liberty of Hindus, constitutional equality under the constitution of Hindus, which means any devotee of a deity should be allowed access. But the Garbhagruha is a different story, in my humble opinion. But the most important T is the presiding deity. So long as we care for the presiding deity and we respect the rights of that deity, I think we should be okay. And in conclusion, I recite 2 shlokas from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrujamyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrutam dharma samstarpanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I think we've reached a point in time when 1947 the nation became independent. But I don't think Hindus are independent today. We are still under the bonds of Europe and invaders, inimical forces that has ruled India for a long, long time, and specifically Sanatana, those who subscribe to Sanatana Dharma, followers of Sanatana Dharma. And till that ends, as far as I'm concerned, I think I'm not free. And on that note, I thank the Hindu Dharma Acharya Sabha for giving me this opportunity. Jai Shri Ram, Vande Mataram. Thank you.